Good stuff. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Leaders Unplugged podcast. My name is Devin, and this is Jackson. And today we have yet another special guest with us today. And we're just going to hop right into it. His name is Andrew Oxley. And Andrew, if you don't mind giving us a little introduction about yourself.
Great, great. Yeah. So glad to be here with you guys today. And uh, gosh, where to start? Do you want some personal background first?
Whatever works.
Okay. So live just north of Atlanta with my wife and four kiddos, who are probably all a little bit older than you two guys, actually, which makes me a lot older than you guys. But I have an executive and leadership coaching firm, and we tend to work with entrepreneur-led organizations, helping them accelerate their financial performance.
Wow, that's pretty interesting background.
Yeah.
Well, we kind of ask this question to every guest that we have as like an introduction. So, how did you first get into like leadership and communication? And
Yeah.
like, what was the process like, for example, like in college, getting to that point, that kind of time frame?
I always tell people I'm uniquely qualified for what I do today, which means I have no qualification whatsoever. I went to school in engineering and got my degree in engineering from the University of Western Ontario in Canada. And in my fourth year of engineering school, I had to take an honors level business class. Every engineer did. And my professor, I'll never forget his name. His name was Jack Lemon, and Jack called me up to the front of the class at the end of the this one particular class, and he said, "Mr. Oxley, will you stay after class?" Which was never a good thing, by the way, when my professor asked me to stay after class. And so this particular day, he said to me, "Will you stay?" And I did. And I went up front. He said, "I've been reviewing your transcript," which was also not a good thing for me because I like to say I was in the 25% of the class that made the top 75% possible. You know, so, and he said, you're not exactly at the top of your class. And I said, "I'm aware of this." And he said, "You are, however, at the top of this class." And I said, "Oh, I didn't know that." And he said, "It occurs to me you should not work as an engineer after you graduate." And I said, "Well, that's sort of sad because I'm in my fourth year and, you know, I don't know what else to do at this point." And he said, "Well, you go sell something technical." And I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't know you could do that, right? So I guess the first thing I want to say is a lot of times when you're young, you think you have to have this perfect plan. You have to have this perfect way that you're going to lay things out. And what I would say to you is you should have an idea where you want to go, but just move passionately in the direction of your dreams and your goals. Because what's going to happen is things will happen along the way, things will unfold. But if you wait to have the perfect plan, you'll just waste a bunch of time. So just move forward. So I did. I sold commercial air conditioning in Toronto, Canada, for a company called Train. They make Canada does require air conditioning. They have a very, very intense summer for about 3 weeks in August. And so I went and sold commercial air conditioning in Toronto. Did that for about 7 years and decided that I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. And I thought I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And uh, I woke up one morning, and in Canada there's this newspaper called the Globe and Mail. In the bottom right-hand corner, there's this little quip, this little thing that's supposed to get your day off to a happy start. And this particular morning, the saying was that even if you win the race, you're still a rat. And I remember shaving that morning, looking in the mirror, thinking, I'm just going to be a big fat rat. That's all I'm going to be. I'm going to be a big fat rat sitting up here in Toronto, and I don't want to be a big fat rat. And I decided I wanted to do something different. Now, I did something really important that day that I didn't even realize the psychology and the importance of it. I just didn't know how to change my life. And so I actually took that particular saying, it's called the Your Morning Smile, and I cut it out. And I still have a copy of it. And I put sellotape on either side of it, and I stuck it in my wallet. And every day when I got money out of my wallet, I'd look at that and I go like, how do I change my life? I don't know how to change my life. And so, but every day I'd look at it. Well, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? So here's the lesson that I think I want to pull out of that for people. So often, the questions that will help you make progress in your life are not the questions you have answers to. They're the questions you don't have answers to. So I didn't know the answer to that question, but I kept asking it over and over and over. Now, what most people do is they run up a question like, like how do I get more done in less time, or why am I always running out of time at the end of the day, or why can't I do this? But they don't know the answer, so they just get busy with what they do know, and they forget to keep asking the question. So one of my favorite questions to ask people is, what are the questions you don't currently have answers to that you're wrestling with? Because those are the questions that will help you make the most progress in your life. Now, I eventually did end up answering that question, decided to start this business. Had some early success with some companies you guys would know, like Progressive Insurance and Coca-Cola and Turner Broadcasting. And that led us to, continuing to narrow what we do, where we only work with entrepreneur-led organizations now, in the leadership development space. So, long answer to a short question. My wife says I excel at that, but that's sort of like a little bit of my background and some of the key learnings that came out of that.
Hmm. So like you mentioned avoiding being a fat rat. What are some like what did you find helpful? Like what are some like key like tips or tricks that people could use to help uh avoid that type of lifestyle and go into something that they really feel like they want to pursue?
Right. Well, you probably heard, the expression, you should do what you love and the money will follow. That is a lie. That is not true. There's lots of people who do what they love and they make nothing at it, right? Uh, so I think it is important to do something that you love, but everything you do has some level of drudgery and difficulty in it, right? And so nothing's perfect. And if it's perfect, you're probably not going to make much money at it, unless you're like Brad Pitt or someone like that who's just, and I'm sure there's a lot of drudgery in what he does too. Don't get me wrong. It doesn't look like that from our perspective, but I'm sure he's like, do we have to do this scene again? Um, you know, so what I would say is, the word you do not hear very much is passion when you're talking about business. What are you passionate about? Now, it doesn't have to be, well, I'm passionate about playing the guitar. Well, maybe, but why am I passionate about playing the guitar? Because maybe I can't make much money playing the guitar, but what does I love about doing that? And you know, so when we work with business leaders and they often feel burnt out and they feel like I don't know what to do with my life. I mean, I'm just doing the same thing over and over and again. What we try to do is reconnect them to the passion of what is the injustice in your industry or in your job that if it was fixed would make a huge difference. Um, and so this goes back to asking questions that you don't have the answers to, right? They're like, well, there's this injustice, but I don't know how to fix that. And I'm like, well, that's perfect. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I don't know how. And I'm like, that's perfect. Because would it be great if you did, though? So every step you get closer to fixing that for your team, for the people that you work with, is improving the quality of their life and it's improving the quality of yours. So the question we come back to is, a life well spent is a life spent in passionate, in my opinion, passionate service of others. It's not about myself. It's not but accumulation of stuff. It's about being of service to others. And if I'm doing it in an area that makes sense and increases value in other people's lives, then I'll probably feel like I've actually not just become a fat rat sitting on top of a bunch of stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of going off of the passion side of things, wanting to have passion in what you do. Um, what did you find was um, what am I trying to say? What was the moment you realized, hey, this is what I'm passionate about, and this is where I want to go? And what were some factors that you had to be like, is this a reasonable place to go? Um,
Yeah, yeah. So for me, it was not a quick experience. It took me a while to sort of figure out not just what I was passionate at, but what I could keep getting better at. And I think that there are certain things that you do that feel effortless. Like it's almost like you're doing them, and I didn't have to like. time just went by while you're doing it, right? So for me, I got to a point where I realized that it was relatively effortless for me to see simplicity and complexity. So when I was presented with a really complex thing, I could be talking to someone, and I was like, I can see I can see the pattern of what's emerging in there, even before they did. And by asking good questions, I could help them figure that out. Now, to me, that was just, it's almost like sometimes the things that come easiest to you, you're like, why don't other people see that? Like, why? That seems so obvious. Surely they see it, but they don't. So there's these two elements. There's what you're passionate about, and there's the things where athletes talk about being in the flow. And so, where can you get in the flow where things just feel like they're just flowing through you and you're not having to push for things to actually happen? So that's another thing that I would say suggest people look for is where does things feel a little effortless? Now, not everything in your job is ever going to feel effortless, right?
Yeah.
Um, but there should be elements of it. Um, the one of the things that there's a lot of studies been done by the Gallup organization around this, and Gallup looks at this and they say that for most people to feel fulfilled in their job, they have to do something that they're really good at least once a day. Doesn't have to be their whole day, but there has to be some part of their day where they feel like, man, I got to do that and I really enjoyed it and I'm passionate about what I was engaged in.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's good. And the passion aspect and like the flow. This may have to this could like answer some of the this question. But you've said that you've worked with a lot of businesses before.
Yeah.
What's based on like observation and everything, what are some like key fundamentals, principles, foundations that you've found in businesses that help them succeed, but also on the leadership aspect and like communication, what are some things that you've found that helps make a company successful in that regard?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, developing leaders is something that successful companies do. Typically, when a company's successful, they're growing. So the challenge with growing is that you tend to outstrip your leadership talent very quickly if you're not careful. So you have to hire leaders in, or you have to develop them within the organization. One of those two things. So a lot of times when we're working with organizations, they've got frontline people and they've got a small leadership team, and they have to create more leadership talent from those frontline people. Because if you hire people from outside the company, you can do that, but you dilute the culture of your organization. So every time you bring a new person in, it actually dilutes the culture. And the culture is what makes most small companies great, is just that unique mix of personalities. So spending time developing people is critical. Now, the problem we get into is that we run out of time. So I have very little time, and if I don't develop the people on my team, then I'll never have any time, but I have no time to develop them. So it's a bit of a catch-22 problem. So no matter what you're doing in your life, the very things that you need to do that will help you make progress faster are the things you don't have time to do. Right. So I'm sure you guys there's probably things you're like, if I could just spend some more time on this, but I have no time. So it's a self-perpetuating problem. So when it comes to time, there's only two things you can do with it. You can spend it or you can invest it. If you spend your time, you're doing the things that have to get done. If you invest your time, you're doing things that don't have to get done today, but will make tomorrow better. And it's like investing money, right? You don't have to invest money, but if you spend everything you earn, at the end of the day, you'll be comfortable, but you've not made tomorrow better. Most people don't think of time the same way. They think of time as just like, I have to do this, I have to do that. You guys probably don't remember. Well, maybe you do. Do you ever watch the movie Caddyshack?
Yeah, I've watched the
Oh, okay. I
movie
haven't seen
long
it.
time ago,
Yep, yep.
but yeah.
You remember Chevy Chase's character? He's walking around with Danny on the golf course, and Danny's saying, "I have to go to college," and Chevy Chase is like, "You have to go to college? Are we in Russia? I don't think we're in Russia." You know, and I always think of that when people say, "I have to do this and I have to that." You don't have to do anything. You are not a victim in your life. You get to make decisions. Now, you may not make like the implications of the decisions that you make, right? You may not like what happens if you make this decision, but it's still your decision to make. And so when people say I have to do this, no, you don't. You either choose to do it or you choose not to do it. Now, when you become an adult in society, basically no one can make you do anything. All that society can do is remove freedom from you if you make bad choices. And if you make enough bad choices, you totally get your freedom removed and you get to go to prison for a little while and think about the choices that you made. But no one can make you do anything. And when you play the victim in your life, right? Basically, you give up all your autonomy, your freedom of thought. You say, I have to go to work. No, you don't. You do not have to go to work. Yeah, well, I got to earn a living. No, you don't. You do not have to earn a living. You either choose to do it or you choose not to do it. Making your choices consciously rather than subconsciously, rather than automatically, is what differentiates successful people from people who are not as successful. So, what do I want to have happen in my life? Don't allow the goals you set to be influenced by what you know or do not know. If you're passionate enough about what you want to achieve, you'll go figure out how to make it happen. But if you set goals you're not passionate about, you'll just muddle in the fuddle, so to speak, and just sort of keep going. It'd be nice, but you know,
Yeah.
it really matter, I suppose, if I don't achieve those goals.
Yeah. So, uh, at what point in your life, because these are I think these are all things that you kind of have to learn as you go, or be taught, right?
Right.
So at what point in your life did you realize, hey, this, time can be spent different ways, and you start realizing how it affects you and stuff like that, and kind of what ratio of investing time and using your time did you start out with, and what would you recommend for kind of just an average, person starting a business or something like that?
Yeah, well, and you guys know better than me. There's more access to information today than there ever was when I was your age, right? You know, everybody's all wow, wow, wow about AI and Chat GPT, but I will say that Chat GPT is one of the best things that could happen in terms of helping people understand the biases that they have. Now, you put crap prompts in there, you're going to get crap information back for sure, right? But
Uh,
one of the things that I love about ChatGPT is it will challenge your thinking if you ask it to do it. So, for example, if I was your age, I say, listen, here's some goals and aspirations I have. Interview me one question at a time until you feel like you have enough information to give me a good plan for the next 6 months of how I should be spending my time. And it will do that. Now you got to ask it to ask one question at a time, or it'll ask like 50. But it asks a question, you answer. Asks a question, you answer, and say, here's how you probably should be spending your time for the next 6 months, right? But what you have to do is you have to make sure the plan is manageable for you. Let me give you an analogy. You guys are young and in shape, so you don't know about uh, having to work out because you have to. You guys, if you work out, do you guys work out or run or anything right now?
Not particularly, no.
Well, you get to my age, you got like I got to go do some exercise, or I just end up like a big fat lump on the couch. So but if I'm like a middle-aged guy and I want to get in shape, the very first thing I do is like, okay, I'm going to go get my some new running shoes, and I'm going to get some jogging shoes, and I'm going to start running. And I go out and I run 5 miles that first day, and the next day I can't walk, right? And I'm like, oh, like this running thing doesn't work. Well, the problem was that I started too fast, and when you start too fast, you just stop, you fail eventually. So what we really need to do is set our goals in a much more manageable way. So if I want to invest time in the short term, the first thing I need to do is not try to figure out, I'm going to read like a book a day. No, you're not. If you're not reading anything right now, you're not going to read a book a day. Okay, so I'm going to read a book a month. Maybe not. But could you read for 15 minutes today? Yeah, I could do that, right? There's more wisdom in books. You can see all the books behind me. There's more wisdom in books. You can learn from people who are dead and have been dead for hundreds of years, and you can learn the wisdom from that. So, what I would recommend is start small. Start trying to listen to a podcast like you guys are doing here, right? Uh, what can I read? What's a book that I can read? What am I interested in? Um, what do I want to do? Ask ChatGPT. Here are my interests. Who are some historical figures that have had similar interests? And is there a biography about them that I could read? All right. So, but do something that's interesting to you. Because if you try to pick up something you're not interested in, guess what? You're not gonna follow through, and you're not gonna read for an hour a day if you're not reading at all today. So that would be my recommendation. Start small with something you're interested in learning about.
What are some like personality traits that someone might possess that you think would be helpful in a leadership setting? But also what might be some characteristics that might inhibit someone in a leadership setting?
Yeah. So one of the core values of our organizations is humility. And humility is key to success in almost everything in life, by the way, not just leadership. But humility isn't thinking about yourself less, it's thinking less about yourself. So I'm not focused on what I want all the time. A lot of times, what leaders are doing, well, here's where I want to go. And so, what do I have to do to get there? Leadership is really all about trying to get a group of people passionate about some purpose, something you're trying to accomplish. If it's just about accomplishing a goal, you're going to accomplish the goal and you're going to celebrate for like 3.2 seconds and set another goal. And your people are going to be like, wait a minute, but we just worked so hard on this goal, right? So, you know, having the humility to be able to talk to other people and find out what they want are interested in accomplishing is a key uh, ingredient of leadership. The second one I would talk about is gratitude. Gratitude for what you have, gratitude for the people around you. Gratitude is incredibly magnetic. Um, there will be always be people who are more successful than you. There will always be people who are less successful than you. There are people who have more, people who have less. You guys probably have friends who are parents are much wealthier than your parents, and you have friends whose parents are not as wealthy as your parents, right? So comparison is a dumb game. But if you're going to compare yourself to people who are less well off than you, because then you'll be grateful for what you have. Not that you're better than them, just that I'm grateful for what I have and what I've been given in my life. Um, and when people find a grateful spirit, they want to help that person. When they find a humble spirit, they want to help people like that. Find people that are more successful than you, and ask them really good questions about how'd you get started? What did you do? A lot of stuff you're doing on this podcast, right? But you can do that with anybody. Like, what are some mistakes you made when you were my age that you wish you could go back and undo, right? Um, and that nothing that you can't say in public, of course, but the things that maybe you're like, man, if I had known, I mean, isn't it true? If you talk to most people who are a little bit further along in their life, they're like, man, if I knew then what I know now. Well, you can't live your life in reverse, but that wisdom is really helpful to young people. Now, the problem I know when I was your age is I thought that people who were older than me, well, they didn't know that much. And so I had a tendency to discount the advice that I got from them. But really, doesn't mean because they give you advice you have to follow it, but you just sort of weave that into what you're doing. You think, that's interesting. What if it is true? What if that is true? How would I act differently if that was the case? So those are three things that I look for in leaders: humility, gratitude, and a desire to continue to learn from others.
Um, just in kind of your day-to-day, I guess, duties, like just the things you do kind of every day. Um, what have you learned? when when you're doing the things that are like, it's I have to get this done. These aren't the things that I necessarily enjoy, but the things that help me move forward. What would you say are the motivations to get those things done in order to get to, the more exciting parts of your job?
Right, right. Well, first of all, I think the problem with work is it tends to expand to meet the time allowed, right? So, if I've got something I have to get done and it's okay, again, I'm gonna work till it gets done, but it takes forever to do it, right? I was blessed with some early bosses that taught me a lot. And I remember one of my first bosses, his name was Jim Kay. Jim worked with me, taught me. And one day, uh, I was Jim's like little lackey. I was the one who did all his work for him. Um, when Jim didn't want to do something, he'd throw it over my cube and I'd have to work on it, right? He was leaving one day at about 6 o'clock and he walked by my cube and he's like, "Hey, what you doing?" I'm like, I'm doing all the stuff that you've given me over the last few." And he's like, "Well, how much you got left to do?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I'm going to be here till midnight." And he's like, "Really?" He's like, "Midnight?" He said, "Let's go next door for a beer." I was like, "Jim, I don't have time to go next door for a beer. I got to get all this stuff done." And he said, "Let's go next door." So we walk next door. I'm thinking every minute I'm spending here is another minute I got to spend at work, right? And he starts talking to me. He's like, "So what are you working on?" And I tell him, and he's like, I'll bet you I can get you out of there by 7. And I was like, 7? Are you kidding me? Isn't that I'm gonna be there till midnight? He said 7 o'clock. I'll make a bet. So we have a bet. And at 6:58, we were walking out the door. It was all done. And he was like he's in there, "Why are you doing this?" And he's giving this, give this to Joel, give this to such and such person. Here's how we do this. So we're walking out the door, and he said to me, "What time is it?" I said, "Jim, you know what time it is." And he said, "Do you know why we're leaving at 7?" And I said, "Yeah, because you helped me." He's like, "No, that's not why we're leaving at 7. We're leaving at 7 because I had a goal to get you out of here at 7. You had a goal to leave at midnight, and you would have been here till midnight." So the first thing I learned from that was that the time expands to meet the work expands to meet the time allowed, right? So we give ourselves way too long to do the things we don't want to do. So if you've got something you don't want to do, how fast can I do this? How quickly can I get this done? Not how long might I think it's going to take. How quickly can I do it? So that's the first thing. The second thing was he did something really important. He didn't assume that I had learned the lesson because I hadn't learned the lesson. I thought I was getting out of there early because he'd helped me, but that wasn't what he was trying to teach me. What he was trying to teach me was that you can get things done a whole lot faster if you really try. Zig Ziglar had this great story he used to tell, and I'll ask you guys. I'm like, do you guys have a lot to get done in a given week? You guys have things you got to get done on a weekly basis right now?
Yeah. I mean, this podcast has been
Yeah.
taking up a lot of
Yeah.
our time, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's say editing the podcast and doing stuff, let's say it normally takes you like 8 hours. And you're like, this is going to take, like 8, 10 hours to do all this. But if I said to you, and this is an experiment Zig Ziglar used to ask, he said, if I said to you that if you could be at the airport at 9 o'clock this evening, I'm giving you an all expense paid trip to Cancun, Mexico for a week, could you get it done?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
There'd be
What
very
happens?
much of an attempt.
All of a sudden you're like, "Oh wow, we'll find a way to make that done." So time is elastic, right? We have a tendency to think that things take a certain amount of time, and time is elastic. We can stretch time and get more done in the same amount of time, depending on how focused we are and how committed we are to getting things happen in a specific period of time. The problem is we don't think of it that way. We have a tendency to think this is going to take so long. No, not necessarily. How fast can we do it? And with technology today, you can figure things out like that really, really easily. So that's what I would say. I would say just realize that we have a tendency to take too long on things that we don't want to do, and just rather than trying to figure out how fast could I do this, how could I make it a game and do it as fast as possible.
So, you mentioned that you have a family, and I'm kind of curious, how have you managed to keep adequate time for family, but also for work? And like, what were some ways that you would like uh, give advice to people to balance that workload? Because sometimes it could be like overwhelming or like,
Yeah, yeah. And all right. So first of all, people talk about work-life balance. There is no such thing. All right. Work and it's always going to be out of balance in some way, shape, or form. If you try to balance it perfectly, it's always going to be a little bit out of balance. The question is your focus appropriate? What happens a lot for people is that they work really hard at work and then they feel guilty that they spent too much time at work. So they go and spend a bunch of time at home trying to fix things and then they ignore work and they're constantly traveling. When they're at work, they're mentally at home, and when they're at home, they're mentally at work. But with phones and everything we have today, you are constantly available. There's no way to balance things because people can text you, they can email you, they can bug you anytime they want. And so we have a rule here at our company. Do not, unless there is a fire, like a literal fire, not a figurative one, call me after 6 p.m. on a weekday or at all on the weekend. Don't text me if it could be sent by an email. If you text me and it should be an email, like text should be exclusively for things that are very time dependent, not for things that are, just I need you to look at this. Because a text is like dings on your phone immediately. And a lot of leaders will have email download directly to their phone and let them know when an email comes through. I'm like, why are you doing that? Like you're actually training your people to interrupt you. So don't respond immediately to things. Um, so while it's you can't keep things perfectly in balance, when you're at home, be home. When you're at work, be at work. Now, if you need to do something for home, go do it. But don't be like dealing with a bunch of home issues when you're at work, and don't be dealing with work issues when you're at home. Now, for a lot of leaders, they're like, that sounds great. You own your own company, you know. So I've heard that objection for years. And what we say to them is, look, based on the way your company and your job is structured right now, that's probably not possible. But I want you to look on your calendar and go out 6 months and schedule a 1 week vacation that you don't plan on checking email during, that you don't plan on interacting with anybody. And then figure out over the next 6 months, how do I do that? How do I make that happen? This goes back to having a question without an answer, right? You can't make that change today, probably, but you can make that change within 6 months. What needs to change in my organization? Who do I need to develop on my team? Who's going to cover for me? And I'll cover for them when they're on vacation. Because a lot of leaders go on vacation and they come back and they're like, was it worth it? I mean, I got all these emails, I got all this stuff. I'll just check email while I'm gone because then it won't be as hard when I get back. Well, that's like putting a band-aid on a problem. That's not solving the problem. The problem is you've got too much stuff that's not being handled by somebody else. So that would be my recommendation in terms of getting balance is stop doing the traveling in your mind and start focusing on, when you're at work, focusing, how do I get more done here? Not how do I work until the work's complete. It will never be complete, ever. There's always more you can do. And when I'm at home, how do I make sure I'm focused on what I'm doing while I'm at home?
Yeah, this is kind of that's interesting. But this question, it's kind of tying into like what you've kind of seen just like over the years. Um, for like when you've been helping companies with like leadership, like Progressive and like Coca-Cola. What is one failure that you've seen in the company of its performance that is like a valuable lesson to take away, but also what is one success that you've seen throughout your whole career that you're like, that's a valuable life lesson to take away?
Yeah, so I'll do the failure first. And it's that what we try to do is we try to change too much too fast. You guys ever go to the fair and you play whack-a-mole where the mole pops up and you hit it with the big hammer and then no matter how
Uh-huh.
fast you hit the moles, another one's popping up over here. So a lot of times leaders play whack-a-mole They're trying to fix a problem and fix a problem and fix a problem. They're so busy fixing problems that they're not really ever really getting the progress they truly desire because they're not really addressing the root cause of any problems. They're essentially not investing time. They're just spending it. They're fixing a problem, and they want, why do I keep getting problems? Same problems over and over and over again. It's exhausting, right? So what we try to teach companies to do is back up and say, okay, all these problems I've got, what do they all have in common? I have found that in general, there's only in any job, in any field, in any company, there's only three problems. And so when I say that to a leader, they're like, well, what are they? I'm like, I don't know. You do. There's three problems that manifest in thousands of ways. And the reason I know this is that what happens as people have been in a job for a while, the problems start to, oh, I get it. I know what to do when that problem happens. But what they don't realize is this problem looks a lot like this problem. And this problem looks a lot like this problem. They're all basically the same problem. So we don't address root causes, we address symptoms. And when you address symptoms, the problems keep coming over and over and over again. So that's the biggest thing that I find companies need to do. What is really happening, not the symptoms of the problem. So that's the biggest failure or challenge. And I think that's just a human challenge. It's the longer you're in a job, the more you start to see a pattern of how problems are connected. Now, the problem for leaders is that now I can see the pattern, but that's not enough. I got to teach the people who report to me to see the pattern. And if I've recognized, here's the pattern, I should be able to teach it to someone else, but that's not what leaders say. I'm like, it's hard to teach people this job. There's so many different ways that so many problems. You guys got to do this for a really long time. Well, that's a cop out. That's a cop out of not doing the hard work of really thinking about what is really happening in the business and how could I teach this to someone so that they don't have to spend 20 years figuring it out. So that's the biggest challenge. Now, the biggest success is I had a client at Progressive, and super successful guy, ran a big chunk of their claims organization. And I used to joke that he could get more done wandering around than people could do in scheduling meetings for a year. Um, and he just did. He just wander around. And if you met him, he was just like a good old boy. You'd think you might have thought, oh, this guy's just like an average guy. No, no. He was like running an organization of about 7,000 people at the time. But he's just a great guy, and you just meet him, and he was very interested in what was happening with you, and he wanted to know how he could help you. What's going on? What can I help you with? Now, when you do that enough for people, at some point when you need something, people want to help you because you helped them when you didn't need anything in return. Now, what sometimes leaders do, they're like, I got to get some help from these people over here. I got to get them to help me. Well, they don't really care about helping you because they have different goals. They have different things that they're working on. They have different problems. But if I were to reach out to those people and say, hey, listen, what's happening with you? How can I help you? Like, I don't have time for that. I got to work on all my problems. If you help them work on their problems, when you actually need their help with a problem, they're going to want to help you. So what I would say is the biggest thing when it comes to success is getting the focus off yourself and spending a little bit, not all week, just a little bit of time talking to other people about what's happening. At least being interested in the problems and the challenges that they're experiencing. Because if you do that, you'll get a reputation for somebody who's a giver, not a taker. And there's essentially two types of people in the world. Right? There's a joke about that, of course. There's people who say there's two types of people and people who don't say that. But there's two types of people. There's givers and there's takers. And there's probably people you know right now that if their face showed up on your phone, you'd be like, oh, hell, what do they want? Because they always want something from you. They never call you up and like see what you need, right? You want to be the person that when your name shows up on someone's phone, they're like, oh, I can't wait to talk to them. I wonder what's happening with them, because they're interested in you. They're not just interested in what they can get from you. So that's a success and a bit of a challenge that organizations deal with.
That is like very true. Like I just like am resonating with this so much because Devin and I we went on a trip to interview some people. The episodes by the time this is out, they'll be posted. But one of the guys, his name was Tim Faust, and he's
Mhm.
this musician and he's in Nashville. And we did not expect the benevolence that he would show to. He drove us around. We didn't have a car. He drove us around and we were like, is this real? Like there were so many moments of just like this guy is so nice.
Yeah,
And so yeah, that just really resonates, you know.
yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so attractive to when people do stuff for you that's unexpected, right? And you're like, wow, that was they didn't do that because they were trying to get something from me. They did it because they just were interested and wanted to help. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
So what's in your whole years of experience, um, kind of learning that over those years, of course, how have you kind of put that into work in your own company?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, uh, everything that I do in helping entrepreneurs, I run an entrepreneurial organization myself. So I get to first try it with my organization to see if it works before I try it with other people. Um, One of the things that I had to learn was how to hire people really well because some years back, I was some of my staff told me I was no longer allowed to hire anyone because I sucked at it. And I'm like, well, I'm like the owner. I got to be able to hire people. And they're like, no, you're horrible at it. And I had to be honest that, first of all, I was glad that they felt comfortable enough to tell me that I was horrible at something. Um, but I had to go get a system. What's a system that can help me ask the questions so that I can get a better idea of who I'm actually hiring? Because I was really good at instilling passion in people. People always wanted to come work with us when I interviewed them. And my staff pointed out that's not the point of the interview. The interview is to see if they should be coming to work with us. I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess that's true. So I had to restructure the way I was doing interviewing. So, um, you know, a lot of leaders want to delegate hiring to some other party, or it's the last thing you should delegate. You have to get good at learning to read people and understand people, um, because ultimately that those hires are gonna you're gonna live with them for a long time. Uh, so you hire somebody, by the time you realize maybe they were mishired, it's 2, 3 months in, and then you gotta sort of be fair to them and give them a little bit longer. Gosh, you could be a year in before you really are able to make a transition that you really realized was a mistake after 2 months. So super important to get good at figuring out how to hire. That's something we help our clients with. Having difficult conversations with people, it's for some people that's easy, and for some people that's hard. Just because it's easy doesn't mean you're good at it. I've figured out. And just because it's hard doesn't mean you can't be good at it. Skill and what's comfortable are not the same thing. And sometimes what leaders do is they equate comfort with skill. If you're comfortable with conflict, doesn't mean you're good with conflict. If you're uncomfortable with conflict, doesn't mean you're can't be good at it. So those are a couple of things that I've had to learn over the years personally, because I'm not comfortable with conflict, and I'm really good at pointing out when other people are not doing it. Um, but I had to learn that, hey, I'm not doing a good job with it either, right?
Yeah.
I learned that I wasn't good at hiring either.
So you mentioned reading people and getting to know them. What are some ways that you found it to be useful in getting to know people and reading them? Because personally, that's an interest of mine. Because I'm at college and I'm majoring in psychology, and so
Oh,
that
yeah,
kind of
okay.
ties into that. So
Well, you may be familiar with a guy by the name of William Moulton Marston. Marston was the originator of, or he brought the Greek theory of temperaments into modern use, and he wrote a book called Types of Men um, or actually, he wrote a book called The Emotions of Normal People in 1934. And I've got a book here called The Four Faces of Frustration, directly related to yours. Now, I will tell you, when I was in I think I was in seventh grade. I wrote a book called by Edward de Bono called Six Thinking Hats. And I should have realized I probably shouldn't have been an engineer because I'm reading something about psychology in like seventh grade. I mean, who does that? But I had the circuitous route to doing what I do now. And there's a lot of psychology in what I do today. That book that I wrote is all about Marston's theory. And what Marston said was the Greeks actually did this thousands of years ago before we had computer programs. And they characterized people as four different types of people: the wind, earth, fire, and water. And we still use this terminology today. You ever hear someone described as always hot under the collar? They're always sort
Mm-hmm.
of, other people are full of hot air. Other people we describe as the salt of the earth, and other people like they're just deep like a still pond, like so. So the Greeks had this theory, and Marston actually looked at that and he said, look, he brought it up into the 20th century, and he said, look, some people are very dominant personalities. We call them reds. When they walk in a room, it doesn't matter who's in charge, they're in charge. They just take charge. They shouldn't, even if they shouldn't, they start telling people what to do. And interestingly enough, it's never moving fast enough for them, and they're incredibly passionate about everything that they do. Um, and we call them reds because they look angry to people all the time. They're not necessarily angry, but well, sometimes they are. But they're very passionate about stuff, right? And it's never moving fast enough. So when they're frustrated, the face they show is anger. Now, everybody gets angry from time to time. I mean, but three of the four behavioral styles transition through anger into what we call frustration. But reds sort of stay in that angry sort of thing. So when you're dealing with someone who's a red, what we sometimes try to do is calm them down, and that just pisses them off. They're just like, stop telling me to be calm. I'm not calm. So you have to match their intensity when you're dealing with a red. Yellows, they like to move fast, just like reds. But the reason we call them yellows is they're the people that can put lipstick on the pig and tell you how everything's wonderful. And so a lot of times with yellows, they're very verbal, they're very persuasive, they're very engaging, and they can almost convince you when they're frustrated that everything's fine. But they haven't really addressed the problem or whatever's actually happening. So reds and yellows both like to move fast. Reds are the ones who are telling everybody what to do. Yellows are the ones who are trying to persuade people of what they should do. But they're both trying to take control of the situation. And we move over to the greens, and when greens are frustrated, they just stop talking. You guys know anybody like that? That when they're frustrated, they just get quiet. And if you're not careful, you
Yeah.
think, oh, they're all bought in. No, they're not. They're plotting your demise. They just stop. All the emotion goes out, right? And so recognizing that this is somebody that needs the space to actually talk. They need the space to actually engage, and telling them to engage and telling them to talk does not get them to want to talk. And the final behavioral style of engagement is the blues. And the blues, their face they show when they're frustrated is sort of worry. And they start asking tons of questions like, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And that's how you know they're frustrated, because they're like, nobody else is paying attention to the details. We have to get you to pay attention to the details. So by understanding who you're working with, you can modify your engagement with them and the way you interact. So if you if you engage with each of those four behavioral styles exactly the same way, because you guys have a sort of a face you have, you'll get along with the people who are just like you, and there'll be at least one of those people that you're going to piss off because they are so unlike you. And these are the people you meet sometimes, and you're like, what's wrong with them? Like I would never act that. Um, they're in what we call your shadow. They're your lowest plotting point on that behavioral curve. And so they respond in a way that's diametrically opposed to the way that you would want to. So I don't know about you. When I was brought up, I was taught to treat other people the way I wanted to be treated.
Hmm.
That's wonderful in morality and ethics. It's horrible in leadership and interpersonal communication. Because if I treat you the way I want to be treated, um, I'm going to get along with you if you're just like me. The question isn't how I want to be treated. It's the question how you want to be treated. How do you want to be communicated with? And that requires leaders to have their antennas pointed outward, not back at themselves. If I'm worried about what people think of me, I'm not paying attention to how my message is landing with you. So just being focused on the other person. And so the disc, it's called the disc system, DISC, and it's incredibly powerful. It's been around forever. It doesn't answer everything, but it's a simple system. And when most people read it, they're like, man, that is me. And it allows you to start to understand that, oh, not everybody's like me. That book is available on Amazon, by the way. Shameless plug here for the book. It's written as a little bit of a narrative, a story about a guy who takes over a company and he's leading this truly dysfunctional team. And I wrote it as a story because I hate business books, even though I have a lot behind me. But most of them are really boring. They're not exciting, they're interesting. So I wrote this one with a little bit of a flair.
Huh. Okay. Cool. And
Interesting.
we'll put that in the link in the description too. So if anyone watching or listening wants to check that out, that will be in the description. Otherwise, if I understand correctly, you do a lot of like public speeches, am I right?
You, yes.
So in that, what would you say is kind of for someone who's not very good at public speeches? And this is a little bit of a segue out of what we've been talking about. But in terms of public speeches, what would you say is uh, a key thing? Man, sorry, my English is just gone. Um,
Like a tool or like a
yeah,
trick.
what a key trick? That's what I was looking for. What would you say is a key trick for um, making whatever you're talking about, whatever speech it is, uh, be presented well? Even if you're like, I don't know if I'm prepared enough for this or anything like that, what's a good way to seem confident even in an unsure situation like that?
Yeah, well, when people tell me that they're not afraid of public speaking, I always sort of laugh. I just said, well, you just haven't spoken to a big enough group yet. Everybody can get to a group where they're like, I heard this is a really big group. If you're not afraid to speak in front of a group, you're just delusional. I mean, everybody, when I first started doing what I do today, used to speak to groups of about six, and I was nervous. Now I speak to groups of thousands and I'm nervous, right? So I didn't get there overnight. I did a lot of work with smaller groups. The way you make your content more memorable isn't by not preparing. It's by taking your content and you divide it up into what we call chunks. A chunk is a message. Like, okay, so this part of my speech, what I really want people to remember is this. Okay, that's the chunk. Okay, all right. So now, what are some stories I can tell about that? So if you notice, one of the things I've been doing in our conversation, I've been telling you stories. The
Hmm.
story has been related to a point. So I tell you the point, and then I tell you the story, and then I tell you what the point was that the story was supposed to be telling. So people love stories. You start giving people a laundry list of crap, they're like, I don't even, where am I? As you're listening to someone, your brain is burning calories, and at some point your brain asks, is it worth the calories to listen to this person? And sometimes the answer is no. I don't want to listen anymore. So all I would suggest is, you know, uh, don't try to cover too much. For most people, unless you're talking for hours and hours and hours, which hopefully you're not, three things is the maximum that most human beings can remember. So, what are three things that I want to get across? And what are three stories that I could tell that would help illustrate those 3 points? And then practice. There's a statistic that Steve Jobs practiced for 30 minutes for every minute he was on stage. Now he was on stage for almost an hour at those presentations. So just you do the math, like that's a lot of preparation, right? But he looked so effortless up there. Well, he looked effortless because he had prepared so much. So preparation, what you do is you practice the chunk, practice the second chunk, practice the third chunk, go back, practice the first chunk, practice a transition from the first chunk to the second chunk. So the chunks are important and the transitions in between are important. So, but nobody's comfortable at first.
Hmm.
And if people tell you they are, it's just that they haven't spoken to a big enough group yet. They'll get to it.
Well,
Good stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think this is a good point to wrap up the interview?
Yeah, I mean,
Unless
we
you have any
always,
other questions. But
yeah, either way, I mean, I think we could get to the one big question we always ask in every interview, and that would be just over the course of either just the interview, what we've talked about today, or throughout your life, what would be one key thing that you've learned or that you've talked about that you would say is the most important for the audience to remember?
Yeah, we talked about investing your time or spending it, right? Well, the question is where to invest it. And one of my early mentors said to me, he said that the amount of progress you make in your life will be directly proportional to the amount of honesty you can accept about yourself. And what I found is most people don't want to be honest about what's happening. They want to blame this person or blame that person. And there's always going to be circumstances outside your control. But the question is, what can I do differently that would improve the quality of my life and the quality of the people I love's lives? And if I don't know the answer to that question, I got to go find someone who does. But it's not some circumstance outside myself. It never is. There's always something I can do differently. So, you know, if you don't have anybody who will speak honesty to you with love, go find someone because they're out there. And if you ask someone, how could I get better? And they're like, oh, you're awesome. That means one of two things. Either they don't know or they don't want to be honest with you. So if they don't want to be honest with you, why would that be? Like, do they not think you're going to react well? So look for people who will help you learn what you need to learn. That's what I would say.
That's really good.
that is good, yeah.
Because I mean, like, even just thinking, through even working with a podcast, right? Doing this as a team, right? Like, and that kind of goes all back into communication, right? Being able to, be honest with the people you're around,
Mhm.
and maybe even in some cases, the customer in maybe certain circumstances, it's good to be honest. Um, and just thinking back, like over my life, it's like you can kind of see looking back, like wow, like the way people treated me or treated how I've treated others and stuff like that. It's like you can kind of connect those dots, like that was a pretty trustworthy person, or like oh, maybe I didn't handle that in the way I should have. And I think that's kind of an eye opener, even now. Um, that it's like, shoot, there's things that you could change, and there's some of it's it takes time, and some of it's, I would say, easier than what you might think. You just don't necessarily see it right away.
Right.
So I think that's really good. But otherwise, I think that's
I think, yeah, we can wrap it up.
good stuff.
Yeah.
You want to do the outro?
I mean, you could do that.
Okay, yeah, either way. Um, Thank you so much, Andrew, for being here today and giving us all these incredible tips. For those watching or listening, if you enjoyed this, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button, hit that follow button, all that good stuff. Let us know who you want to see on the podcast next, because maybe one day you'll see them. Otherwise, it's been fun being here. We learned a lot today. Again, one more big thanks to Andrew Oxley. Be sure to check out his book. That will be in the link in description. And otherwise, yeah, that'll be about that. We'll see you all next time.